Hello, YouTube. It is Reese. Don't really know what the day is, but I do know that it is the 12th at 4:55 p.m. Um, so that would have to be hmm, Thursday. All right, Thursday then. Um, I had an idea of what I wanted to talk about today, but after I kind of vented everything last night, it felt really cathartic to just get all that out there, last night. And yes, I know I'm smoking. I gave it up, and then I brought it back and gave it up, and it's a love-hate relationship. I do not recommend. I don't recommend people picking up smoking. I don't recommend that kids try to go ahead and start smoking because they think it looks so cool. It's not. It's not. It's kind of vicious, you know. Um, I guess maybe that's what I'll talk about today. Is what are things that we grew up with, seeing and admiring and thinking that it was just so cool, either because a parent did it or a relative did it or advertising or what. Um, for me, for me at the time, growing up, as y'all know, I'm 34 years old, which means I was born in 1979. And there's a train going through town tonight. God damn. Again, like every day. Welcome to Fresno. Um, like I was saying, I was born in 1979, so that means I grew up during the 80s and 90s. During the 80s, advertising was still in that golden age of being able to use cartoons and really target their audience at really a younger generation and not really have to pay the consequences for kids picking it up because they saw Joe Cool doing it. And if you don't know who Joe Cool is, then I suggest you do a Google search and look up images, and Joe Cool will come up as the Camel for Camel cigarettes. Um, and then even throwback to earlier movies of from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, mainly the 20s and 30s, and some of the 40s. You know, um, you saw really macho men and like Humphrey Bogart and Clint Eastwood smoking cigars or smoking cigarettes, and that was just a very manly thing to do. Um, you even saw women that were very classy and very to do. With these long cigarette holders and extenders, and it looked very regal, I guess would be the best word for it. But and it's weird. The sun kind of went down real quick within the last 10 minutes. Um, so growing up, I kind of had that little bit of a thought of, well, it kind of looks cool. And, I grew up on a military base in San Francisco called Treasure Island. Treasure Island now is residential, but at the time it was all military. And I would say there was maybe 10% of the population there, male or female, in the adult ranges anyway, that were not smoking. Maybe 10%. All the other guys, most of the other women, my mom didn't smoke. Most of the other women smoked, and I don't know. I think for the guys, because they were on the ships and whatnot, it was kind of a stress reliever for them. Um, but also alcohol played a part in that as well. That you know, um, we saw our dads and our moms come back off the ships, and some of them they couldn't deal with whatever it is that they saw whenever they were out. My dad was in the Coast Guard. My mom was in the Coast Guard Reserves. When my dad was away, she was not called out ever. As a matter of fact, I don't. There was only one time that my mom actually got called out for deployment, and that was during the Gulf War, and that was later in the '90s. But my dad was on the ships pretty much all the time, and he cruised the bay, and he rode the Rush 723 all the way up to Alaska, and probably as far down as Mexico, I think. But he did a lot of body retrieval. Um, and some people just aren't equipped to handle that, you know. And so when my dad would come home, I would see him drinking, and I would see him smoking cigarettes. Well, the first time I ever picked up a cigarette was, I think, maybe about 6 or 7. And they had, my brother and I, we went to the shed in the back. It wasn't literally a shed. It was kind of a storage unit thing that was kind of built onto the house. Um, we lived in like a row of houses, so it would be 1 house, 2 house, 3 house, 4 house, all in one big section. 1220B Bayside Drive, still standing today. Most of the houses are boarded up from the '89 earthquake, but our house is still livable and inhabited, and that's a whole nother story. But we went out to the little, like I said, the little shed thing out there, and we took a couple butts, and we took some matches that my dad left out on the table. My parents were still asleep, and we tried smoking. Couldn't figure it out. Couldn't figure out how my dad was getting the smoke in and blowing it out the way that I have been doing this whole majority of the video. It wasn't until one of our neighborhood friends, Nathan, and his brother, probably a couple weeks down the road or something, they were smokers, and they weren't much older than us. I think Nathan's brother was maybe 13, and he was the person that actually showed me taught me how to smoke, more or less. Um, but like I said, I grew up in an environment where it just seemed cool. It seemed like the guy thing to do, to fit in with the other guys, even though I grew up as a female. And none of the other kids really ever saw me as a girl, not until later when we moved to LA and I started going through puberty. Um, and you know, it got to the point to where my mom begged my dad to go ahead and stop smoking cigarettes because there are health complications that come along with smoking. One of the other reasons why I'm also trying to quit, and I've been trying to quit for years. Well, my dad looked at my brother and I and said, every time I pick up a cigarette, shove a piece of candy in my mouth. So that's what we did, and that worked. My dad hasn't smoked in over 20 years. Probably pushing 27 years now, ish, somewhere around there. Um, but the drinking continued. You know, the drinking continued not just with my dad, but with his friends and all of that. And later on in life, I started drinking as well, um, because I thought that that's how you dealt with things, how you dealt with your depression, how you dealt with dysphoria when you dealt with things that you couldn't explain or verbalize. Um, so, I started taking a drink here and there, and I did go to school a couple times with beer on my breath. Wasn't exactly my proudest moments. Um, I'm gonna change the camera angle. Busted out the wheelchair again from last night. So, yeah. And it wasn't until later on in life when I hit around 21. I was living in Michigan, and I had just turned 21, and I was with my partner at the time, who was a doctor. And I dealt with a lot of things in that relationship of her not being out and um, not being able to tell anybody who my girlfriend was, dealing with my own dysphoria, and not really still having a name for what I'm going through and what I felt. It wasn't until I was with her that she actually told me that women could transition to men. Growing up in the 80s, I saw men transitioning to women, but never saw publicly women transitioning to men. Not that I knew of, anyway. Um, so I became an alcoholic, and I drank pretty much every opportunity that I could. It wasn't until I moved back here, and I believe I was 23, and I was working at what's now the Express. It was 708 Deja Vu. Um, and I was working at what is now Legends, which was then the Express. Um, and I was working Burger King, and I was working Jack and a Crack, and I was also doing security. So I was doing 5 different jobs at any point in time. Um, my drinking increased. Also, drug use increased, and I started getting into methamphetamines, and um, what clicked it for me was at 23 when I got home from the Express, and I didn't have any recollection of how I got home. I had to physically go outside to make sure that my car was there. And my car was there. There was no damage to it. Nothing. Um, I assumed that I took the same back roads that I always did from the Express back over to my mom's house, which is where I was living at the time. And after that, I said, yeah, I can't do this. So I went for years without drinking. I went probably a good 5 years, 5, 6 years. And when I started actually drinking again, it was not to that extent. It was always in a social setting, and always 1 or 2 drinks, and which is what I still do. If I'm in a social setting, and if I do feel like having a drink, I will have 1 to maybe 3 drinks. I don't drink to get drunk. I have a really high tolerance, which kind of runs in my family, and so I just take precautions to make sure that I don't get into that sort of a relapse situation again. Um, and same with the meth. You know, um, I didn't have any issues as far as being so high that I didn't recall getting home. My issue was I was using it as a way to stay awake in between each of the 5 jobs. So I would do, I would do a couple lines, you know, uh, I would do maybe 1 or 2 every couple days. Um, and then I'd have a couple weeks where I wouldn't do it, and then I would go back, and I would need to do it again because I just couldn't stay awake. I had too much shit to do. Um, but it got to the point to where the meth was starting to control me, and I was no longer controlling the meth. It was no longer a viable means of staying awake. It was no longer a party thing of, yeah, I'm just going to relax and have a good time and chill with friends. Um, as it's depicted in movies and, with ravers and all of that other shit, and realistically it's not all it's cracked up to be. Now in movies they actually show both the good side, the being able to have energy and up and raving and having a good time and relaxing, doing ecstasy and things like that. I've actually never done an ecstasy, but with meth, it calmed me down, and I just got quiet. But I had energy, and I was on top of my shit. But when it was getting to the point, it was starting to get to the point of, I need to do this every day, throughout the day. And I went one day like that. And I said, no, not, no, no, no more, no more. And that was 7 years ago. Um, and I walked away clean from it. I wasn't clean in my head at the time, but I walked away and made a clean break from it, and I choose not to associate with people that do that anymore, and I choose not to put myself in situations where it could be there. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's been easy. I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't thought of relapsing, because I have. Um, but being a quote-unquote public figure, at least in Fresno, I choose to not be in that situation, because people, people are watching everything that I do, everything from my Facebook posts to my askfm.com to my YouTubes to, when I go out. I have a duty to make sure that kids, when they see me, and I do interact with kids quite a lot, that they see me at my healthiest. Yes, I'm overweight, but they see me at my healthiest, of not high, not drunk, that I'm okay. Okay enough to at least take a step back when things are getting a little bit too rough and say, okay, I need to think about how to appropriately deal with this and cope with this. It's not always easy, and I have sought mental health help for it before, and I still receive mental health services. And there's absolutely no shame in that. Absolutely no shame. But my point being is that there are certain things that when you grow up in wherever you live, that are portrayed as being cool, as being okay, and the it thing, and it's always dangerous. Whether it be gang banging, whether it be stealing a couple of dollars out of your mom's purse, whether it be, doing a line here and there, or smoking a little bit of pot. I have no problems with pot. Trust and believe I don't. The only time that I have a problem with pot is when people make excuses for their behavior, of stealing to get it, or thieving, whatever definition you want to put on it. No, no. I have a responsibility to take responsibility for my actions, um, every minute of every day. So, yeah. Sorry that I made another 20-minute long video, but leave a description, or, comment down in the bottom of what was taught to you. And that's my computer and my phone going off because of Facebook notifications. But what was portrayed to you growing up as being cool, or the masculine or feminine thing to do? Was it healthy? Has it helped you in life? Did it make you a better person? Did it help you maybe see yourself a little bit better? I hope that maybe this video helped you understand a little bit better about me, and I hope that maybe it gave you a little bit of insight to maybe yourself too. But yeah, be good to yourself, be good to everybody else, and just know if you're currently in a situation where you are addicted to drugs or alcohol, there are people that are willing to help, and I'm one of those people. If you need help of any kind and you need it done anonymously, hit me up either here or on Facebook, and I will look up any sort of services I can for you in your area. Okay? So yeah, I guess next video I will cover self-harm. It's a video that I've covered before years back, and it's probably about time that I need to update it. So yeah, be good to yourself, be good to everybody else, and love yourself no matter what. Love yourself. You're worth it. Peace.